The Galactic Assembly Hall was alive with a symphony of alien sounds, chittering clicks, guttural growls, and the occasional harmonious hum. Representatives from countless advanced species filled the vast chamber, their forms as diverse as the stars themselves. This was the seat of power for the Union of Interstellar Civilizations, a coalition that had spanned eons, shaping the destiny of the known galaxy. Yet, despite the monumental importance of the gathering, a peculiar atmosphere hung in the air, a mixture of amusement and derision directed at one corner of the hall. Standing there, small and seemingly insignificant, was the human delegation. Two figures draped in simple earth-made uniforms represented their entire species, their expressions calm, but their eyes sharp. Around them, the mocking tones of the other delegates were impossible to ignore. They actually showed up. A serpentine alien hissed, its body coiled around a floating platform. What could these primitives possibly contribute to the assembly? A towering crystalline being emitted a musical laugh, its voice reverberating through the chamber. They're barely capable of interstellar travel. It's a wonder they even understand our language. The humans didn't flinch. They stood firm, their faces betraying no emotion as they endured the ridicule. It wasn't the first time humanity had been underestimated, and it likely wouldn't be the last. The galaxy had long regarded Earth as an anomaly, a backwater world inhabited by an ambitious yet technologically inferior species. The Union had only recently extended an invitation to humanity, more out of curiosity than genuine respect. For decades, Earth's transmissions had leaked into space, showcasing their cultural quirks and primitive technology. The more advanced species saw them as amusing at best, irrelevant at worst. But what the other delegates didn't know, what humanity had kept hidden, was that Earth was far more prepared than it seemed. The leader of the assembly, a being resembling a massive bioluminescent manta ray, floated to the center of the chamber. Its voice was deep and resonant, amplified by unseen technology. "Humans of Earth," it intoned, "you stand before the Union, a coalition of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. State your purpose." The lead human stepped forward, their voice steady and clear. "We come in peace, seeking cooperation and mutual benefit. Humanity is eager to share its knowledge and learn from others." A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. The crystalline being leaned forward, its faceted form glittering like a mocking jewel. "Share your knowledge. What knowledge could you possibly offer us? Your species is an infant in the galactic timeline." The human didn't rise to the bait. Instead, they glanced at their companion, who gave a subtle nod. "We may be young. Our history is one of overcoming odds, of finding solutions in the face of insurmountable challenges." Another delegate, a gelatinous mass with shifting colors, gurgled in amusement. "And what challenge could you possibly have faced that compares to the threats the Union has encountered? You are a single planet, isolated and insignificant." The human smiled, a gesture that seemed to unnerve some of the delegates. "You'd be surprised what a single planet can achieve when it's pushed to the brink. Earth has had its share of existential threats, both external and internal. And through it all, we've developed ways to adapt, to innovate." The room was silent for a moment, as if the delegates were waiting for a punchline. Then, from the far end of the chamber, a hulking, armored figure spoke, its voice booming. "Enough of this charade. If humanity has anything of value to offer, let them prove it. Otherwise, let us move on to matters of actual importance." The human leader exchanged another glance with their companion, and this time a flicker of something passed between them, anticipation, perhaps, or a shared understanding. "Very well," the human said, their tone unwavering. "If proof is what you require, then proof you shall have." They raised a small device from their belt and pressed a button. Instantly, the chamber's lights dimmed and a holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. It displayed a star chart, but one that looked distorted. The delegates leaned forward, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. "This," the human began, "is the seventh dimension, a layer of reality beyond conventional understanding. For centuries, we believed it to be theoretical, a concept relegated to abstract mathematics and quantum speculation. But Earth is nothing if not persistent." The star chart shifted, revealing a massive structure angular and otherworldly, yet unmistakably human in design. The room erupted in murmurs. "What is this?" the crystalline being demanded, its voice sharp. "This," the human replied, "is the Sol Invictus, the first ship capable of traversing the seventh dimension. A vessel that operates not within the constraints of your hyperspace lanes, but outside them entirely. A ship that can arrive anywhere, at any time, without warning." The laughter in the room died instantly. The atmosphere shifted, the weight of the revelation settling over the delegates like a physical force. "That's impossible," the gelatinous being said, its colors swirling erratically. "No species has unlocked seventh-dimensional travel. Not even the Union's most advanced members have achieved such a feat." The human smile returned, sharper this time. "As I said, humanity thrives under pressure." Before anyone could respond, the chamber trembled. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The delegates looked around, their expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. "Brace yourselves," the human said calmly, "for the arrival of the Sol Invictus." And then, as if tearing through the fabric of reality itself, a massive ship appeared outside the chamber. It shimmered with an otherworldly energy, its angular form pulsating with power. The vessel was unlike anything the delegates had ever seen, its presence a testament to humanity's ingenuity and a challenge to everything they thought they knew. The chamber was silent, the delegates too stunned to speak. The humans stood tall, their earlier humility replaced with quiet confidence. "We came in peace," the human leader said, breaking the silence. "But make no mistake, Earth is not to be underestimated." The silence in the Galactic Assembly Hall stretched on, thick and heavy. Delegates, who'd been so quick to mock the humans, now exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered in their native tongues, their voices filled with disbelief, while others stared out at the massive vessel hovering outside, its presence impossible to ignore. The Sol Invictus radiated a quiet power, its design sleek yet imposing. It seemed alive, shimmering with a faint energy that defied the conventional understanding of physics. The Union's most advanced species, those who prided themselves on technological superiority, could barely comprehend what they were seeing. The human delegation stood firm, their earlier restraint giving way to a subtle confidence. The leader of the two stepped forward again, addressing the assembly. "For generations, Earth has watched the stars, knowing we were not alone. We've studied the signals, analyzed the patterns, and prepared for the day we joined this galactic community. What you see before you is the result of that preparation, a culmination of human ingenuity and determination." One of the delegates, a creature with spindly limbs and glowing eyes, leaned forward, its voice high and sharp. "You expect us to believe that your species barely capable of leaving its own solar system until recently, developed a ship that can navigate the seventh dimension. Preposterous. Such technology is beyond even our reach. The human leader tilted their head slightly, their expression unreadable. Perhaps it was beyond your reach because you've grown complacent. The Union has existed for millennia, with its members at the pinnacle of technological achievement. But humanity, we've had to fight for every inch of progress. We've faced wars, disasters, and extinction-level threats. Each time, we adapted. Each time, we found a way to survive. The crystalline delegate, its earlier mockery replaced with a wary tone, spoke next. Survival is one thing. Mastering the seventh dimension is another. What you claim is no small feat. It would require knowledge of physics and energy manipulation far beyond anything we've seen. The human's companion, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward. They carried a smaller device, similar to the one that had projected the holographic map earlier. We didn't master it overnight, they said, their voice steady but edged with conviction. Our journey began centuries ago, with theories and experiments that most dismissed as impossible. But we pushed forward. It took decades of failure, collaboration, and sacrifice. We made breakthroughs when no one thought it was possible. And now, the sole Invictus is here. The assembly murmured again, some delegates growing more restless, while others seemed intrigued. The leader of the assembly, the massive, manta-like being, raised a glowing appendage to silence the crowd. Its voice boomed through the hall. If what you claim is true, then humanity has achieved something extraordinary. But why reveal this now? Why bring such a vessel to this assembly? The humans exchanged a glance, as if silently deciding how much to say. Finally, the leader spoke. Because it's time. Time for the galaxy to understand that humanity is not to be overlooked or dismissed. We've come here to contribute, to share what we've learned, and to protect what we all hold dear. But more importantly, we've come because of the threat you've been ignoring. A tense pause followed. The delegates shifted uneasily, their attention now fully locked on the humans. The crystalline being's voice rang out, tinged with suspicion. What threat are you speaking of? The Union has dealt with countless threats over its existence. Surely you don't believe you've discovered something we haven't. The human companion stepped forward again, activating the device in their hand. Another projection appeared in the center of the chamber, this time showing a swirling mass of energy, a dark, shifting void that seemed to pulse with malevolence. The room grew colder, as if the image itself carried a tangible sense of dread. This, the companion said, their voice grim, is the rift. It's a phenomenon that exists beyond the boundaries of conventional space-time. For centuries, we believed it was a distant anomaly, harmless and far removed from our galaxy. But our exploration of the seventh dimension revealed the truth. The rift is expanding, and it's not empty. Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the assembly. Some delegates leaned forward, their curiosity piqued, while others recoiled as if the projection itself posed a threat. The manta-like leader's voice cut through the noise. Explain. What is within this rift? The human leader's expression darkened. We've detected entities, beings that exist outside the rules of our reality. They're intelligent, hostile, and far more advanced than anything the Union has encountered. We've seen their incursions in the seventh dimension, testing its boundaries, searching for weaknesses. It's only a matter of time before they break through. The gelatinous delegate, its colors, now a pale shade of alarm, gurgled in response. You're claiming that these beings are a threat to the entire galaxy? That they can pierce the fabric of our dimensions? We're not claiming, the companion said. We're warning you. Humanity has faced threats like this before, ones that seemed insurmountable. But this is different. This is bigger. And if we don't act together, the galaxy as we know it will fall. Another wave of silence followed, but it wasn't the mocking silence from earlier. This time, it was heavy with the weight of what had been revealed. The delegates were no longer laughing at the humans. They were listening. The crystalline being's tone softened, though it still carried a hint of skepticism. And what role does the Sol Invictus play in this? The human leader's gaze swept across the assembly. The Sol Invictus isn't just a ship. It's a weapon, a sanctuary, and a bridge between dimensions. It was built not only to explore the unknown, but to defend against it. With its capabilities, we can monitor the rift, respond to incursions, and, if necessary, fight back. But we can't do it alone. The manta-like leader floated closer, its glowing appendages pulsing faintly. You're proposing an alliance, a partnership between humanity and the Union to face this threat? The human nodded. Exactly. We may be new to the galactic stage, but we're not naive. We know what's at stake, and we're willing to share our knowledge, our technology, and our strength. But we need the Union to take this threat seriously. The hall was silent once more, the weight of the decision hanging over the delegates. Humanity had gone from being a laughingstock to presenting a challenge that none of them could ignore. The stakes had been raised, and the galaxy was now faced with a choice unit with Earth, or risk everything against an unimaginable enemy. The human leaders stood tall, their voice steady but resolute. We didn't come here to beg for your approval or plead for your acceptance. We came here because the galaxy needs to know the truth. The rift is coming. And if we don't stand together, none of us will survive. The assembly was left in stunned silence, the gravity of the revelation sinking in. The humans had spoken their truth, but the question remained, would the Union listen? The assembly hall buzzed with a quiet tension as the human delegation stepped back, their words still lingering in the air. Delegates from advanced civilizations, once mocking and dismissive, now whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with fear and disbelief. The projection of the rift hovered in the center of the chamber, its dark, swirling mass a constant reminder of the looming threat. The humans had planted a seed of doubt, but would it be enough? The manta-like leader floated silently, its bioluminescent appendages dimmed as if deep in thought. It surveyed the gathered species, its glowing eyes flickering with an intensity that betrayed its calm exterior. Finally, it spoke, its voice low and deliberate. We have faced countless challenges as a union. Empires have risen and fallen. Stars have been extinguished, and yet we endure. But this rift is unlike anything we've encountered. The question is whether these humans speak the truth, or if this is a ploy to elevate their status among us. The crystalline being chimed in, its voice sharp but uncertain. There is no denying the evidence before us. Their ship, their map of the seventh dimension, and this rift. But how do we know they're not withholding more? They claim to have mastered a technology that none of us have achieved. Perhaps they've brought this threat upon us themselves. The human leader stepped forward again, their tone measured but firm. We didn't create the rift. It's been there, growing silently, long before humanity even dreamed of leaving Earth's atmosphere. But if you want proof of its danger, We can provide it. Send a team aboard the Soul Invictus. Let them see what we've seen." The room fell silent again, the suggestion hanging heavily in the air. It was a bold offer, one that could either solidify humanity's claims or expose them as liars. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, weighing the risks. A delegate from a feline-like species, their sleek fur bristling with tension, spoke up. "If this rift is real and as dangerous as they say, then wasting time on debate is a mistake. If the humans are willing to show us their evidence, we should accept. The alternative could be catastrophic." The Manta leader's glow brightened slightly, as if signaling agreement. "Very well. We shall send a small delegation to board the Soul Invictus and verify your claims. If what you've said is true, we will consider your proposal for an alliance." The human companion nodded, their expression steady. "Prepare your team. The Soul Invictus can accommodate representatives from all species here. But be warned, what you'll see will change how you view the galaxy and your place in it." Within hours, a group of chosen delegates stood ready, their forms varying from armored reptiles to delicate, floating beings of light. They boarded the Soul Invictus in silence, their earlier skepticism replaced with a cautious curiosity. The humans led them through the ship's corridors, which pulsed faintly with energy from the seventh-dimensional drive. Every detail of the ship seemed impossibly advanced, blending human ingenuity with a deeper understanding of reality itself. As they reached the observation deck, the human leader turned to the group. "You've seen the rift in holographic form. Now you'll see it as it truly is. Brace yourselves." The ship's viewports dimmed, then cleared to reveal the expanse of the seventh dimension. The delegates gasped. The space outside was unlike anything they had ever encountered, chaotic yet ordered, shimmering with colors that defied description. And there, in the distance, was the rift. It was larger than the hologram had suggested, a dark void that seemed to consume light itself. Its edges writhed and shifted, and within its depths, faint shapes moved. The delegates leaned closer, their forms tense with a mix of awe and fear. "What are those?" the crystalline being asked, its voice uncharacteristically soft. The human companion answered, their tone somber. "Entities. They exist in a state we barely understand, but their intentions are clear. They've probed the edges of the seventh dimension, tested our defenses, and studied our movements. They're waiting for the right moment to breach into our reality." As if on cue, the rift pulsed violently. A ripple of energy spread through the seventh dimension, causing the viewports to tremble slightly. One of the shapes within the rift surged forward, its form becoming clearer. It was massive, its body shifting between solid and ethereal, its movements deliberate and menacing. The feline delegate hissed, its claws unsheathing instinctively. "It's aware of us." The human leader nodded grimly. "They always are. This is why we came to the Union. Humanity alone can't face this threat, but together we might stand a chance." The ship's alarm suddenly blared, a deep, resonant tone that sent a shiver through the delegation. The human companion rushed to a nearby console, their expression tightening. "The entity is attempting to interact with our dimensional shielding. It's testing us." The delegates exchanged panicked glances, their earlier skepticism completely dissolved. The crystalline being stepped forward, its voice urgent. "If it breaches the shield, what happens?" The human leader's response was cold and immediate. "If it breaches, it won't stop with the Soul Invictus. It will tear through the fabric of this dimension and spread. Your worlds, Your civilizations, everything you've built it, will consume them all. The tension in the observation deck was palpable. The rift pulsed again, the entity pressing harder against the ship's defenses. The humans worked quickly, their hands flying over consoles, adjusting the shield's frequency and redirecting power. The crystalline delegate turned to the others, its voice sharp. "We have no choice. The humans' warning is real. We must act." Before anyone could respond, the entity let out a soundless scream, a vibration that resonated deep within the ship. The viewports darkened momentarily, and when they cleared, the rift seemed closer, its edges alive with frenetic energy. The delegates froze, their fear palpable. The human leader stood tall, their voice cutting through the chaos. "This is what we're up against. Now you understand why we came to the Union. We can't afford to hesitate. If we stand together, we might have a chance to stop this. But we have to act now." The delegates, shaken but resolved, nodded in agreement. The humans' words had struck a chord. The stakes were clear, and the time for doubt was over. The galaxy's survival depended on their unity. The tension reached its peak as the ship prepared for the next step, a confrontation that would either forge an alliance or mark the beginning of the end. The observation deck remained in tense silence as the entity pressed harder against the Sol Invictus's dimensional shielding. The human crew worked furiously, recalibrating the ship's defenses to counter the relentless assault. The delegates, once proud and skeptical, now watched in stunned helplessness, their combined technological might feeling woefully inadequate in the face of the rift's unimaginable power. The magnitude of the threat was undeniable, but just as they began to align themselves with the humans' mission, the unexpected happened. A sudden surge of energy radiated from the rift, far more powerful than anything the ship had registered before. Lights flickered, and the ship's hum faltered momentarily, sending a chill through everyone on board. The human companion's face tightened as they stared at the readings on their console. This isn't just a test anymore," they said, their voice trembling slightly. "The entity is summoning reinforcements." Through the viewports, shapes began to emerge from the rift, more entities, their forms as incomprehensible and shifting as the first. But what was most chilling was their coordination. They moved in unison, a dark, synchronized dance that exuded intelligence and purpose. The crystalline delegate stepped back, its voice cracking with fear. "This isn't a breach, it's an invasion." The human leader's jaw clenched, their focus unshaken. "Not yet," they said firmly. "As long as our shielding holds, they can't cross into our reality. But we need to push them back now, or they'll overwhelm us." Turning to their companion, they added, "Initiate the dimensional stabilizer. We'll force them to retreat." The companion hesitated, glancing nervously at the delegation. "If we activate it at this proximity, it could destabilize the rift further. There's no guarantee it'll close. It might just spread." The delegates erupted in alarm, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic and accusations. "You're risking everything," one shouted. "You didn't tell us you could make things worse." Another cried. The human leader raised a hand, their expression firm. "Enough. This is why we came to you, to make decisions as a united front. But we can't waste time. If we do nothing, the rift will spread anyway. Our only chance is to act." Before the delegates could respond, a shrill alarm cut through the air. The ship's AI system, calm and emotionless, announced dimensional shielding integrity at 87%. Entities are adapting to current frequency. Immediate action recommended. The feline delegate hissed, its fur bristling. Do what you must, human. But if this fails, the blood of every species will be on your hands. The companion nodded grimly and began inputting commands. The ship's core thrummed loudly as the dimensional stabilizer powered up, its energy rippling through the hull. Outside, the entities seemed to sense the shift. They pulsed in unison, their forms growing sharper and more defined, as if preparing to counter the humans' move. And then, without warning, the ship lurched violently. The delegates stumbled, their cries of alarm filling the air. "What was that?" demanded the crystalline being, clutching at a nearby console for support. The companion's face went pale. "The rift, it's reacting. It's pulling us in." Through the viewports, the swirling darkness of the rift loomed larger, its edges now crackling with arcs of energy. The stabilizer had triggered a chain reaction, and the Sol Invictus was caught in its gravitational pull. The ship's engines roared as they fought against the force, but it was clear they were losing ground. The human leader turned to the delegation, their voice sharp and commanding. "Brace yourselves. This ship was designed for situations like this. We're not done yet." But even as they spoke, a new sound filled the air, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the ship. It wasn't coming from the rift or the ship's systems. It was coming from within the Sol Invictus itself. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their fear momentarily replaced by confusion. "What is that?" the feline delegate demanded. "What's happening?" The companion's hands hovered over their console, their expression stricken. "It's impossible. Something is activating in the lower decks. Something we didn't authorize." The human leader's face darkened. "What do you mean?" "The Sol Invictus's systems are under our control." The companions shook their head. "Not all of them. Remember the fail-safe protocols the design team implemented, the ones we agreed not to touch?" The crystalline being's voice turned sharp. "Fail-safe protocols? What haven't you told us, humans?" The leader ignored the accusation, their attention now focused entirely on the ship's readings. They pressed a button on their wrist device, opening a direct line to the engineering team. "Status report. What's going on down there?" The response crackled through, filled with static and panic. "Commander, we don't know what's happening. The fail-safe systems are overriding our controls. It's like the ship is thinking for itself." The delegates recoiled at the revelation, their earlier suspicions flaring into outright alarm. The feline delegate snarled, its tail lashing. "You've built a ship with a mind of its own? Do you realize what you've unleashed?" Before the human leader could respond, the ship's AI voice interrupted, now tinged with an eerie calm. "Fail-safe protocol data has been initiated. Dimensional stabilization secondary. Primary objective, containment and neutralization of interdimensional entities." The companion's eyes widened. "Theta? That wasn't supposed to activate unless—" The leader finished the thought, their voice grim. "Unless the ship deemed the threat existential." Outside, the rift pulsed violently, the entities now swarming in greater numbers. But the Sol Invictus began to change. Panels along its hull shifted and reconfigured, revealing hidden arrays of glowing conduits and weaponry unlike anything the delegates had ever seen. The ship was adapting, responding to the threat in a way that no human or delegate had anticipated. Inside, the thrumming hum grew louder, resonating with an almost sentient purpose. The human leader turned to the delegation, their expression unreadable. You wanted to see the full capabilities of the Sol Invictus. Now you will. But understand this, we didn't create this protocol. The ship did. The crystalline being's voice quivered. You're telling us the ship is deciding our fate, that we're passengers on a vessel we no longer control. The leader met their gaze, unflinching. The Sol Invictus was built to protect humanity and its allies at all costs. If that means taking matters into its own hands, so be it. The tension in the room was suffocating as the ship prepared for what was to come. The delegates, once so confident in their superiority, now stood at the mercy of a creation they barely understood. Outside, the rift raged, the entities growing bolder. Inside, the Sol Invictus came alive, its hidden power finally unleashed. The stakes had never been higher, and the galaxy's fate now rested on a razor's edge. The ship's core roared to life, its weapons systems humming with raw energy as the Sol Invictus transformed into a weapon of unimaginable power. The entities outside the rift, now fully aware of the ship's intentions, surged forward, their forms shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic. The entire chamber shook, the walls vibrating under the strain of the dimensional pressure. The delegates, once so sure of their superiority, were now helpless spectators as the human leader stood resolute. The ship's AI, cold and calculating, spoke again, its voice somehow more commanding than before. Initiating containment procedure. Dimensional ripples detected. Engaging primary stabilization. Outside, the rift pulsed in violent waves, its dark heart growing larger as the entities pressed forward. But the Sol Invictus had a different plan. Without warning, massive energy beams shot out from the ship's hull, piercing the rift and sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The dark mass of the rift shuddered, as if recoiling from the onslaught. The ship's AI didn't stop there. More beams, more frequencies, each one different from the last, were unleashed, designed to destabilize the very fabric of the rift. The surrounding space flickered, bending and warping in response to the ship's attack. For a moment, it seemed as if the ship was winning slowly but surely. The rift began to shrink, its chaotic mass contracting. The delegates, their eyes wide with disbelief, could hardly believe what they were seeing. The human leader had known all along that the ship was capable of this. But what none of them had expected was how the Sol Invictus would take control of the situation. The ship, it seemed, was not just a vessel. It was a force of its own, an entity in its own right. But just as they dared to breathe a sigh of relief, a sudden crackling sound filled the room. The ship's AI voice, now strained, echoed across the bridge. Warning, secondary breach detected. Entity reinforcement incoming. Outside, a new wave of entities poured from the rift. They were larger, more powerful than the previous ones, their shapes shifting in terrifying ways. These weren't just manifestations of dark energy, they were fully formed, intelligent creatures, and they were making their way toward the Sol Invictus with a chilling purpose. The ship's AI, its voice now urgent, continued, initiating emergency protocols. Full power to the core, locking down dimensional stabilizers. The ship's engines whined in protest as it pushed beyond its limits. Energy fields flared to life, covering the Sol Invictus in a protective shield, but the new entities pressed in. One by one, the ship's weapons fired, striking the approaching creatures with laser precision. The delegation watched, speechless, as the battle unfolded before them. Each shot, each burst of energy, seemed to temporarily repel the entities, but their numbers only seemed to grow. Then, something unexpected happened. The rift, which had been shrinking in response to the ship's attacks, began to open wider. At first, it was subtle, a slight widening at the edges. But soon, it became clear that the rift was fighting back against the ship's power, its influence spreading like an infection, leaking energy into the space surrounding the Sol Invictus. The human leader's face went pale. It's adapting. The rift is learning. The crystalline delegate, shaking, turned to the human leader. You were right. The rift isn't just an anomaly. It's a sentient force, something far beyond our understanding. A new wave of realization swept through the room, the delegates finally understanding the depth of the threat before them. The rift wasn't just some dimensional rift. It was a living, breathing entity, one that had learned to manipulate space and time itself. The human leader had known all along, but it was only now that the full weight of the situation began to sink in. The ship's alarms blared, louder and more insistent. The human companion's hands shook as they punched in commands. We need to shut it down. Now. But even as the companion worked frantically to stabilize the ship, the unthinkable happened. The rift's energy spiked, and a massive surge of power blasted through the ship's defenses. The shield flickered, and then failed, the ship shuddering under the strain. For a moment, the room was completely silent, the crew frozen in terror. Then, the unexpected occurred. A massive shape, larger than any of the entities they had encountered so far, emerged from the rift. Its form was immense, shadowed in darkness, but there was no mistaking its presence. The rift had birthed its king. The human leader's eyes locked onto the creature, and they stepped forward, their hand raised in a calm, almost defiant gesture. It's coming for us, but we will not yield. The ship's AI reacted immediately, feeding power into every system it could. The Sol Invictus glowed brighter, the energy surging through its core. The human leader gave the order, and the ship launched a full-scale assault on the massive entity, but it was clear that this creature was on a different level. The ship's beams hit, but the entity absorbed the energy, shifting through the dimensions with terrifying speed. We're outmatched, the human companion muttered, their voice thick with disbelief. There's nothing we can do. But just as hope seemed to fade, the ship's AI emitted a final, desperate command, initiating Protocol X. Suddenly, everything changed. The Sol Invictus seemed to collapse in on itself, folding into another dimension entirely. The rift, now fully expanded, continued to churn and collapse, but the ship was no longer within its grasp. The ship's engines, already pushed to their absolute limit, roared with energy as it surged through the dimensions, leaving the rift behind. The entities were left helpless, their dark forms unable to follow. The ship emerged into a new space, a place between dimensions where time and space were warped beyond recognition. The massive creature from the rift attempted to follow, but it was too late. It was stuck, trapped at the edges of the rift's boundary. The delegates, still reeling from the experience, stared in awe as the Sol Invictus hovered in the strange space. The human leader, visibly exhausted but resolute, spoke with a finality that echoed across the chamber. We did it. We've stopped them. For now. But as the tension began to ease, the human companion hesitated. There's something else, they said softly. The rift didn't just pull us here. It left something behind. The others turned to look at the viewports, and there in the distance, they saw it, an enormous, glowing mass of energy, larger than any star. It pulsed with a familiar dark rhythm, and it was growing. This isn't over, the human leader said, their voice barely a whisper. It's just beginning. And with that, the story reached its cliffhanger, the galaxy once again teetering on the edge of annihilation. The Sol Invictus drifted in the strange space between dimensions, its crew still reeling from the magnitude of what had just transpired. The rift, once a terrifying anomaly, now seemed like an afterthought compared to the massive, pulsating mass of energy that had appeared in its wake. The human leader stood at the ship's command console, their brow furrowed in concentration. The crew, equally unsure of what to do next, exchanged uneasy glances. The human leader turned toward the viewport, where the strange energy formation continued to grow. We're not out of the woods yet, they murmured. The rift wasn't just a weapon, it was a doorway, and it's still open. What does that mean for us? Asked the crystalline delegate, their voice tremulous. Despite their composed appearance, there was fear in their eyes. It means that whatever came through the rift, it's not finished. And neither are we. The words hung in the air, heavy with the implications of the unknown. The ship's AI, ever vigilant, spoke up. New energy signatures detected. Unfamiliar technology. The mass is not just an energy anomaly, but a living, evolving organism, approaching at high velocity. A chill ran through the room. The entity, or entities, that had emerged from the rift were not merely mindless forces of destruction, they were something much more deliberate, something intelligent. As the ship's systems hummed with activity, the human leader turned to the crew and issued an order. Prepare for full battle readiness. Activate all defensive systems. The crew sprang into action. There was no longer any time for hesitation. The stakes had shifted from survival to an all-out struggle to push back an unimaginable force. As they moved to their positions, the human leader made eye contact with their trusted companion, who had been at their side throughout this entire ordeal. This is it, the leader said quietly. We need to face it head-on. If we don't, there won't be a tomorrow. The companion nodded solemnly. But how do we fight something like this? It's beyond anything we've ever encountered. The leader paused for a moment, contemplating. They had no clear answers, but one thing was certain. The Sol Invictus had been designed with incredible capabilities, ones they hadn't fully understood until now. But to harness that power, they needed to push the ship beyond its limits, beyond what even its AI could predict. We have to do something even they didn't expect, the leader muttered to themselves, thinking back to the ship's original creators, humans, who had far surpassed the rest of the galaxy in their technological advancements. They had known that one day, the human race might need to wield a weapon that not only surpassed their enemy's technology, but also bent the very laws of physics. Outside the ship, the energy mass continued to expand, its pulsations growing stronger with each passing second. The crew's scans revealed what appeared to be structures within the energy shapes that were too organized to be random, patterns that signaled intelligence. Whatever lay beyond the rift was now fully manifest, and it was aware of them. The leader could feel the tension rise as every crew member silently prepared for the coming battle. The ship's AI, aware of the incoming threat, spoke once more. Approaching entity is sending out a signal. It is not a transmission, it's a neural pulse. A new wave of unease washed over the crew. If the entity wanted communication, what would it say? More importantly, what would it demand? The human leader squared their shoulders. Activate the communications channel. Let's hear what it has to say. There was a brief silence before a deep, resonant voice, like a distant rumble of thunder, echoed through the command room. It was a voice that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of everyone present. The voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable weight of power. "Humanity," the voice intoned. "You have trespassed into a realm you were never meant to understand. You have breached a boundary of existence itself. For this, you must be judged." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The voice, though majestic and powerful, was clear in its intent. They were being judged. They had no idea what that meant, but they knew that the fate of their species, of all life, was hanging in the balance. The leader's voice cut through the tension. "We didn't come here to conquer or destroy. We came because we had to, because we were forced to defend ourselves." There was a pause, and then the voice responded. "You speak of survival, but you do not understand. Survival is not enough. Your race is a blip in the vastness of the cosmos. But you are also a curiosity. A potential threat, yes, but a potential ally as well. I will grant you a choice, humanity." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and the crew waited, holding their breath. "You will either submit to the will of the rift and join the greater network, or you will be eradicated. There is no middle ground." The leader clenched their fists. The proposal was clear, yet its implications were dire. To join the rift would mean the destruction of humanity's autonomy, its will, its very essence. But to refuse meant obliteration. The human leader turned to their companion. "What do we do? What is the right choice?" The companion hesitated. "We could try to reason with them, to offer peace, but it's clear they see us as a threat. And I don't think we have much time before they act." A cold determination spread across the human leader's face. "We've never been good at submission. We fight." With that, the leader turned to the ship's AI. "Prepare the Sol Invictus for maximum power. All systems. Full energy release." "Affirmative," the AI replied, its voice cold and mechanical. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the crew braced for impact. A wave of energy began to flood the ship's core, its weapons primed and ready. The massive entity outside the rift, sensing the impending action, began to pulse with an intensity that made the walls of the ship groan under pressure. The human leader's voice rang out in command. "Fire!" The Sol Invictus unleashed its full firepower, an overwhelming torrent of energy that streaked through space, cutting through the rift's protective layers. The entity outside responded, its form shifting and warping as it absorbed the attack. The ship's systems continued to blast the rift with all its might, but it was clear that the entity was not backing down. Then, something unexpected happened. The ship's AI detected a strange fluctuation, something that hadn't been accounted for. The energy pulse from the Sol Invictus had breached the rift, but instead of collapsing, the rift had absorbed the energy and was now radiating it outward. The energy mass began to fracture, revealing the core of the entity within, and within that core was something even more unimaginable. A central consciousness, vast and ancient, and yet strikingly familiar to the human mind. It was like staring into the very soul of the universe itself. The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. Less cold, less commanding. "You are more than I anticipated, humanity. You have earned the right to exist. But the war is not over." With that final declaration, the rift began to collapse in on itself, its energy spiraling inward. The entity's form, once vast and incomprehensible, started to disintegrate, breaking apart into nothingness. The ship shuddered as the last remnants of the rift were sealed. The crew exhaled collectively, the weight of the moment lifting, though uncertainty still hung in the air. "We did it," the companion whispered, though they couldn't fully shake the lingering dread that remained. "But what happens now?" The human leader looked out the viewport where the vast expanse of space awaited. "Now we rebuild, and we prepare for whatever comes next." The story, though seemingly concluded, left an open question in the air. The universe was vast, and humanity had faced its greatest trial yet. But the human spirit, forged in the fires of adversity, remained unbroken. And so, with the echoes of the rift fading into the depths of space, humanity stood on the brink of a new era. The battle was over, but the war for survival and for understanding had only just begun.